Good evening, Edge Church, and everybody who is joining us tonight. Welcome to our marriage and relationships in the pandemic chat that we are in. My heart is, and really this is my heart, that it will help us, equip us as couples, as human beings in our relationships. In this very topsy-turvy, I call it unusual times. I don't like the word unprecedented. There's some words I never want to use again, and that's one of them. And so I don't know about you, but I know that in my marriage relationship, in my crucial relationships, I need all the support, all the encouragement, all the help that I can get. Because I don't want to just survive this time that we're in, but actually want to come out a little bit better, a little bit more like Jesus. And often my test is, am I a little bit less intolerant? Am I a little bit more patient? Am I a little bit more loving? And that's how I want to come up, just out of this, a little bit more like Jesus. So I'm Barbie Erasmus, and we are going to be talking a little bit about marriage and relationships in this topsy-turvy time. We are excited to have Sue Ryan with us, and Sue, we are so grateful for your time. And honestly, this is my heart. She is the right person to speaking to this subject. She's absolutely passionate about the subject, and that's what I really appreciate and value about Sue. Sue is a clinical pastoral therapist with a private practice and has specialized in couples therapy. As I said, Sue speaks with great passion, but she speaks from her own marriage, her own practice with a deep authenticity and integrity. That's why she's the right person to speak into this topic. A little bit, Sue wants you to know this, that this month she's going to be married, and this is her quotes, to her sweetheart aunt. They've been married for 40 years. Sue, that's amazing. And I think that's a celebration right there indeed. She has 4 daughters, 3 are married. The eldest has a 6-year-old twins, the second a 3-year-old son, and is pregnant with a baby girl due next month. The third came back to South Africa after 3 years in London. And then her 4th one is a 21-year-old special needs adopted daughter who is in lockdown with them. But Sue, before we get to the questions, and I love to actually ask this, do you know that I said that actually this whole lockdown experience is a little bit apocalyptic? And when you understand what the word apocalypse means it means an unveiling, a revealing. A whole lot of revealing has been going on in these unusual times in which we find ourselves. And one of the fascinating things for me that I have been seeing in my own life and in church and online is the incredible amount of creativity and fun and the crazy memes out there that has kept me laughing in this lockdown period. What has kept you going and unlocked some or revealed some of that funny, crazy, creative side to you? Maybe just want to take a moment to write that.
Yeah. So in the first 2 months of lockdown, my daughter and son-in-law were staying with us, my 3rd daughter, because they bought a house. And obviously everything froze and their bond hadn't come through. So they stayed with us for those first 2 months. And that was probably the really crazy time because there was lots of laughter. And one of the things that we used to do, they would do the exercises and we would walk around the house. And we walked around the house about 20 times. And at the end of that, no matter what the weather, freezing cold or not, we'd have to jump into the pool. And we had some crazy freezing cold swims when it actually swimming time was over. And that was lots of fun. And then the other thing I think was being fun is we bought ourselves a gas braai the day before lockdown. So cooking became quite fun when we discovered and experimented with different ways of cooking in the gas braai. And then the third thing, which was surprising for me, is I discovered I actually liked puzzles of all things. And it was interesting to see. I started on 500, went to 1,000, I've gone to 1,500. But the amount of joy and fascination I got from something like a puzzle was quite fascinating for me. Yeah,
I find that interesting because I know several people are doing these 3,000 pieces. I can't even do a kiddie's puzzle. I've never been able to do a puzzle. So I have huge admiration for people who are having their fun like that. But my son, he and his wife and little girl, they live with us. And he said he's been threatening to bring in a puzzle. And I'm just like, no ways.
Don't do it. You should try though.
I should. I know. Sue, so we actually asked folk in our life groups and in our congregation to just put out questions. Bring us your questions, because we really want to hear the heart of our people. And so these are some of the questions that have come to us. So to kick us off tonight, I want us to talk about what are the unique pressures that couples are facing in these rather unusual times, in this COVID time, this lockdown time, in which we find ourselves as people. Yeah.
I think one of the big things is how our emotions seem to change from day to day. And I think it's been surprising for us to discover that we have this huge range of emotions. And I think we started off in lockdown with the sense of relief. We don't have to do all the things we did before, especially if you're an introvert. And then it's changed into becoming something really quite weird. And so it's very hard to actually process what is happening for us. And I know Scott Bonito has said that there's something like collective grief and anticipatory grief. So we all feel a certain grief, and we also don't know what we're going to anticipate. There's almost a fearful anticipation, but we're not sure what we're even anticipating. And so what happens is we get this turmoil that seems to rise up within us. And if we don't process our own feelings properly, the thing that we do in a couple space is we tend to project it onto our partners. So we're feeling unsettled, and then they start to irritate us. Or we're feeling in turmoil and we just get grumpy, or we get sad, or we start criticizing them, or we get into a bad mood. And sometimes our partners then get the brunt of that. And I think that's quite tricky. So one of the things is actually just realizing and normalizing the fact that this range of emotions that keep coming up in us, which we could easily regulate before. We could go out and do the things we enjoyed. We can't do that anymore. And so I think you often see couples getting the brunt of each other's emotions. And the thing is that we need to actually own our own stuff, really, and realize what is going on, and realize this is me, not them, that has to change. And that's the one thing, stop projecting onto them. And then the whole thing of self-regulating is interesting, because how do we then deal with the sadness that comes up, or the irritation that comes up, or the anger that comes up? And I've found that first of all, being able to name it, being able to realize, okay, this is what I'm feeling today. And as we name it, somehow that languaging helps us to say, okay, this is what it is. And we can then journey through it. And then the other thing that's been really helpful for me is actually prayer, and my own spiritual journey is to start in the morning with just focusing on some readings that are encouraging and filling my mind with the peace of God through prayer. That has helped me to actually set my day. And then just stuff like exercise. I'm walking around the house, and it's so nice now that we can exercise. It actually just helps us to decompress a little bit. And then you spoke about creativity, gardening, puzzles, doing crazy things. That's a big part of it. And I think the other thing that happens often is old problems can rear their head. So the stuff that you've never resolved suddenly become big issues again. And somehow during this time, our feelings get intensified. So we get really freaked out about something that we've never sorted out. And actually, this is not the time to do that. I was listening to John Gottman, and he says his research says that 69% of conflicts will never get resolved. That person is that person, and they're not going to change. And Esther Perel talks about the lament, and that is the fact that nobody can actually be what we want them to be at all times for us. And that's the space to lament and say, okay, they're not that, but then to switch over and focus on what they are, and to bring gratitude into who they are. And I also think that, okay, we couldn't have couples therapy in the tight lockdown, but that's maybe a time to reach out to somebody else rather than try and solve it us.
Right. That's really good. I love what Susan Davids in her book, Emotional Agility, talks about how emotions is actually, it's data. It's telling us something, it's not really a directive. And so I really appreciate that it's acknowledging it, and what do we do with it, And I think one of the things in lockdown with Pedro and myself, we just think we've had to say sorry a whole lot of times because of the intensity of this space that we're in, and emotions are everything's heightened, and so
Yeah.
I don't often like to say is the word sorry, you know.
I think
and so,
that whole thing of cutting each other slack and just giving each other more grace actually is important.
absolutely, yeah. And I like what you said, you know, there are things that that was in our marriage when we went into lockdown, and if we, you know, we think we're going to be able to solve everything, and I think you're right, we do need to give each other and ourselves grace and compassion and kindness, and and I think that is so critical in this rather. It's intense. It's an intense time, you know. And at the start of it, Sue, it was like there was that fun aspect, and I had in my mind. I made sure that I went to the nursery, and I was going to do some garden beds and all of that. Let me tell you, by the time we got to the end of level 5, I was like, I was so over it, you know, and it's
yes, I know.
Let's do something different.
It just then got weird, didn't it?
And it feels a little bit weird still. Sue, so, thank you. That is so helpful, especially for us, you know, we need to acknowledge our feelings and our emotions, you know. And so, just another question that was raised, and I'd love for you to just speak into that a little bit here. What does the relationship need in order for it to stay healthy in this time of the pandemic? You know, so we've moved to level 3, we're out of that intense hyper lockdown, there's a little bit more freedom, and we almost felt like things were normal, but we know it's far from that. How do we work on, or not even work on, but how do we guard and nurture so that our relationship comes out maybe a little fluffy? I like to use the phrase of a ragamuffin marriage, you know, that it might be a little bit the hair awry and you know, things a little skew, but we know that it's healthy, not perfect, but that there's a healthiness and a wholehearted living in the relationship and in our lives as individuals and as couples. So
I was looking, last week Sky News had a statistic that said, their research said that 37% of marriages in lockdown got better, 7% got worse. That's what they said, which I thought 7% is pretty good, that only 7% got worse. But they didn't say anything about the 46% left over. And I thought, well, that was just probably people who just like surviving. And I realized we have to make a choice. And I think that's the thing about lockdown, is we have to make a choice. All these challenges we're facing, this can be a transformative time, and we can make choices for our marriage and even make our marriages better. And if I look at what is the essence, just the central thing that we need, and that is actually meaningful connection and spaciousness, both of those. And meaningful connection, I love the acronym of ARE. Meaningful connection is being accessible, A, R is responsive, and C is engaged. So when I reach out to you, will you be there for me? And it's that whole thing of we're married to our person. They are person. They're the person we go to. They are rock, they are support, they are companion. And if we keep reaching and they're just never accessible, or they're always, you know, somewhere else, I think there's a lot of frustration that builds up. And I think that we have to become quite intentional about it, because I think before lockdown, you know, we were busy in our own worlds, and we can have, you know, we can survive. But now to actually be intentional about connection when the person is right with us all the time is also interesting. They're always there, but they're not always connected to us. So we have to be quite intentional. So what I did was, and my husband laughed at me the first time, I got an old bench from the back garden and I put it on the front stoop. And that's our place where we have our coffee, because then you can see, we used to see the squirrels go past, and we watched our neighbor across the road skipping, you know, and all of that. But now, of course, there are people running. There's a bit of a world out there. But and I'll tell you, today it was pouring with rain, but we took our coffee and I put on a big jacket and we sat on our front stoop. And it was crazy also with rain pouring down, but we actually connected. And to create a space of connection, then asking questions about how are you doing? Because we sort of with each other, it's almost like you guess how they're doing. But when you actually say, you know, what's going on for you today? And to actually be able to language it. And the other thing is to bring the fun and humor. Of course, sitting on the front stoop in the rain is crazy, but we need to do that. And then I listened also as something that John Gottman said, which was really good. He said, let fondness and appreciation come out of your mouth. And I think so often we appreciate and love, and it was a great meal, but we don't say it. Or they're looking particularly, good looking today. Well, I like the way your eyes are sparkling today. We don't necessarily say it. Let that come out of your mouth, which is lovely. And then I just want to say, if there's good connection, we feel satisfied. And as busy as we are with kids and work and working from home, if there are moments of good connection, so 10 minutes of coffee and I'll see you at lunchtime, we're in each other's space, but we have those moments of connection, then it's easy to give spaciousness. And there are some people who just rather want spaciousness, and we need that as well. No matter how small our place is, we can still give spaciousness in the relationship. And then I just want to extend that ARE, because the ARE, accessible, responsive, and engaged, is an emotional space for us. And as women, we love that. But it also needs to flow in onto a physical level. So in terms of intimacy, we need to be accessible, responsive, and engaged in our intimacy. And I think that's also something we have to be more conscious about and more aware of, in the actual humdrumness of always just being together, and create those moments and consciously decide to have them. Because interestingly enough, the research is showing more on the neuroscience and all of that actually intimacy reduces a lot of irritations, which we need to have. And it also brings that closeness, the oxytocin bonding, which we feel like we're a team. So emotionally and physically, we're a team.
That's beautiful. And I love what you shared with us, Sue, about the almost like a ritual that you guys implemented, that little ritual of putting every day you go out, you sit on your bench, and you have a cup of coffee. And I think that's important to have those little relational rituals or family rituals, that is just like a reminder or a visual reminder to, whoa, hang on, stop, just be present and engaged and notice what is going on in your life and in the world of the
and ask those
person.
Questions.
Yes.
The
And
questions that go just below the surface.
And I think and it takes intentionality, right? Because
it does.
Because in lockdown you together so often, for so long that, and the lines are blurred in terms of work and family and responsibility, that you feel like you're rolling from one day to the next, and we're missing those moments of engagement and asking the critical questions. I think that is so vital. It is so important. Love it. And deeply aware, that we need to be working on it. It doesn't just happen.
No, it's got to be very conscious and intentional. And it actually pays off. And the interesting thing is, it's the small and the ordinary that is profound. And sometimes we look for us have fabulous dates to eat out at these places, and we can't do any of that. But the small and the ordinary are profound, and we need to do those things for our relationship. That actually brings the sparkle back.
Beautiful.
Or keeps it going after 40 years.
Love it. You're right. It is the small and the ordinary, the things that we overlook, and it's right under our noses, and it can make a huge difference. Thank you, Sue. I love that. I love that you've shared that. I want us to move on to and we're sort of moving in and out of some of these questions, and I like that. I love the flow of it. Just talk to us a little bit about the challenges of lockdown that we've needed to adjust to, but now it's beyond that. We're talking about the whole pandemic and COVID reality. There's been massive adjustments. Talk to us about some of those regarding our marriages and relationships. I've got I know of some folk who've just started a relationship and they hit lockdown, so there isn't that physical contact and connection and intimacy, and it's like they're having to do this relationship differently.
So just there are two sort of headlines, because I'm thinking about as I work with couples, these are two things that come up quite often, and of course there's lots of challenges, but just the headlines of these are screens and chores. So screens, our phones, and social media, and that is actually unavoidable during this time, because they actually are contact with people. I know we get zoomed out. We have all these Zoom meetings in India, like zoomed out. Like I can't even look at the computer again. So there's that. It is a lifeline for us to people. It is our source of information, and it's also our entertainment. So it can be quite all-consuming, and especially social media with the algorithms that have been set up, they can trap us into kind of a rabbit hole where you can just go down rabbit holes and just keeping. And actually, there's a dopamine hit and good feedback that comes. So people get completely pulled into their screens. And I think that's a big factor in relationships. And we need to control it rather than letting it control us. It's positive, and we need it in our lives, but we need to control it. Otherwise, it can dominate, especially in relationships. And I know a lot of people will say, mostly women maybe will say, it feels like he's always got this thing at the end of his arm, and it's much more fascinating than me. And it's so easy. You just get pulled into that. And so it's so important. I think the two issues are timing, one, and accessibility, which is part of the ARE, is actually we need to have, so when we sit on the bench, we do not have our phones with us. And it's so lovely that there's no competition, because some phone, and the minute it peeps, you look at it. That intrusion, and there's always something more compelling than me. We need to have times where we don't have the phone so that we can actually just focus on each other. And then there's a sense of accessibility where we can also decide when, there are times when we have to be on that phone, and actually it's the wrong time to then come along with a question or get irritated. Oh, you're always on your phone. They need to sometimes be on their phone. So always then you negotiate when is going to be our time for accessibility, etc. So I think that's become quite a big theme in couples during lockdown. Yeah, that's the one thing. And then the second one that I want to just talk about is the whole thing of chores. Now, we're all in the house together, and a lot of people who usually have domestic workers do not have their help anymore. Plus, we're homeschooling, so we've got kids all over the place. And, I think we've all worked out our own division of labor normally in a normal kind of setting, and we know who does what or how things work. Most marriages have settled that, or they probably have, but I think this is the time to renegotiate that, because it can't be on one person's shoulders, and it's those little things that can create so much irritation. So I don't think it's any more about 50-50. I think it's about 100-100. So if each of us commits to give 100% of support when we can. So obviously, we can't be doing housework all the time or that, but when we can, we give 100%. And then there isn't that whole sort of competing thing that goes on. They never help, or we know that we will always support at that time. And then there won't be any resentment or scorekeeping. So those are just two, but we've got quite a few other questions that will enlarge on the challenges of lockdown as well. There's so many. The next one, maybe you want to just let's maybe I'll just jump into the next one. Is the whole thing of the change of routine that has happened, the thing of both partners often working from home, obviously no help with house, and plus trying to educate children, and it's hectic, and then also trying to work out time for as a couple, time to relax, and I think for people who have a high sense of responsibility or tend towards perfectionism, it's very, very difficult, because we cannot do it all. Absolutely cannot do it all. And so at some point we have to just let go and be flexible and adapt and get the bigger picture of it all. This is not about achieving, or it's actually about far more. It's actually adapting to what we're all going through. And now my daughter with the twins, her and her husband both work at home, and they've got these twins, and they're in grade 1. They've got to learn to read and write and all those basic things. So it requires a lot of time. And the girls love making forts. So, they make forts all over the house. So you got the, blankets over all the furniture and stuff. And they just decided they're going to leave it for the week, and Saturday they'll do a big cleanup. So no one visits them, so luckily no one sees it, but the house is just full of forts. The kids are happy playing while they're working, and they just clean up on a Saturday. So sometimes we just have to adapt to things like that.
I love that.
And then I think that whole thing, there was another question about a healthcare worker and just the risk that
Yes.
they're in, and then coming home and how stressful it is. And it's another big challenge. Those people are really, really, really going through so much and facing their own health issues or sense of mortality even, you know. And I think the whole thing of self-care within all of these challenges is being able to make sure that we have time to replenish and time to take care of ourselves. And however that looks, we need to, because we can be so focused on kids and house and family and everything else. I think for us to find our space of being settled helps us to then be better moms, wives, husbands, however that looks. Yeah.
I think that is so critical, you know, that in how do we refuel ourselves, you know, because you very quickly get depleted and empty because you feel like you're constantly giving. And this thing of self-care and self-compassion and and looking out. Somebody used the analogy, you know, that we cannot be helping everybody and neglect ourselves. And they use the illustration of when a plane's going down, you make sure that you put on the oxygen mask first before you help your neighbor, you know, next to you. And so we need to be taking care of ourselves spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally.
Absolutely.
In every way we need to be taking care of ourselves.
And it's not our default. It's not our default.
It is.
But it's also another thing that's got to be very intentional. But I think if we look at sustainability, we don't know how long this is going to go on for. We've got to look at sustainability during the crisis. We can't look at just today. We've got to be able to be sustainable.
Yeah, and again, you know, we're not looking to come out of this pandemic, which we don't know how long it's going to go, and we know life is different already, and it's going to be different, and we're not looking to come out perfect and to gloat. We're just wanting to come out in a way that is wholehearted, you know, and in a way just a little bit better. You know, just in terms as followers of Jesus, you know, because we actually do ministry and life out of our marriage relationships. Our marriage relationships is a reflection of that, and so that's one of the areas that is a challenge. That is a challenge for us.
And I love that word transformative. This is a transformative time.
It is,
and it's so life-giving to think, how do I want to transform myself? How do I want to transform my marriage during this time? Not just how are we going to just all breathe and survive. Sometimes I feel like that we need to be able to see that this incredible opportunity to, and it's the whole thing of Viktor Frankl saying, you know, if you find meaning in the challenges is what helps you survive. And the meaning around how you can transform your marriage, transform yourself is actually that really helps me. You know, it gives me motivation to let's do this right. And let ourselves off the hook is a big part of that. Letting go of perfectionism and letting go of that striving space and finding contentment.
And I think that's the key thing, you know, that part of the whole transformative, it is an invitation, and we know that, you know, we've been talking about, we recognize that even what is a seemingly ugly and horrible situation, in that are the invitations of God, you know, to look at ourselves, to look at our marriage relationship, to ask ourselves, so how are we doing? And it is an opportunity to say, actually, maybe we can do a little better, you know. And so for me, I also do see the invitations in this time. And I think that is taking, otherwise, if we don't do that, we're going to like have the grin and bear it, like, let me just see if I can survive this.
That doesn't feel nice.
It's wasted. No,
exactly.
It would feel like a wasted, how many months, you know? And
there's got to be more meaning in it.
There's got to be more. Yeah. There's got to be more to it, you know? And I think that's the perspective and our way of looking at it, you know, there's got to be more. Otherwise, it's a totally meaningless experience that you're just going to survive and Jesus.
Yes, exactly.
So Sue, just I'm thinking, I'm watching our time here because I know that we have 40 minutes, and there's so much to talk about, because I think when it comes to marriages and relationships, it is our most important and vital, and yet it's our hardest to navigate. You know what I'm saying? Because it's the people that we're closest to, that we're most vulnerable with, we're the most exposed to, and they know us so well. And so it takes a lot of work. Give me that one. I'm not looking for the silver bullet because it's not a silver bullet here, but just maybe some of from your own experience of 40 years of marriage, and you leading out of your marriage and living your life out of your marriage. Just talk to us a little bit about that. Yeah. You know, I know that you're involved in church life as well. You do ministry out of your marriage. I do as well, you know.
Yes. I think that whole thing, what comes to mind, of course, always first, is that you can't take life and yourselves too seriously. And we've been in our most stressful times. I have a husband with the most incredible sense of humor, and he is able to make me laugh in the most stressful moments. So I thought, you know, you may think I need to give you a deep spiritual answer here, but actually I want to start just with that, is that first of all, this too will come to pass. This too will come to pass. So when you go through something, you think it's the end of the world, how are we ever going to survive this? And everyone gets all hyped up and in a state. And yes, we do experience those things, but sometimes we need to be able to lift our eyes. Oh, you've got a visitor.
We've got a visitor.
Good, he came just at the time
my
of
goodness.
humor. And you know, to lift our eyes and to actually just bring humor in is so good.
You're so right.
In our marriages. So that's been really helpful for me. And then the other thing that I think has been good is, and I guess it links back to what I spoke about before, is stolen moments. Because, you know, we've had with 4 kids and grandkids and life and church and busyness, we love to escape, the two of us. And we love the stolen moments. It's like playing hooky at school, you know, you're bunking school. It's kind of like, let's do it, you know, let's go. So we've actually found moments. We've got a little flat in Simonstown that we escaped to, and also even in the height of our kids growing up and the craziness of what it was in those years, we would take, even when they were all at youth, maybe on a Friday night, we could have had an hour and we would run off. And then we would just, at one point, our thing was, we always had like little goals that we like to do. One of them was going to all the coffee shops, different coffee shop every time, and things like that. You know, they were just silly things, but we found ways, and again, it goes back to the small and the ordinary. And we love having projects together. We walked the Camino about 3 years ago. Well, not all of it, but some of it. But having those little projects together and things that we do together has, in the middle of all the other pressures of life, has been very sustaining for us. And I think in lockdown it's different. But it's a little bit, it can still be more of the same.
You're right. It's been so good chatting. Sorry about that little intruder on my lap, but that's
that was good timing. I love that.
It's been so good chatting with you, Sue. And I know you've been connected with us and connected with our counselling department, and we have valued your input and your wisdom and your experience and what you bring. But I think just who you are as a person, you know, and your husband, who often is involved in marriage counseling, and we value that. You know, it's so fantastic to see that. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for what you bring. And I hope that
that's a pleasure.
For those of us online, this has been helpful, and to me, encouraging, supporting. I love a phrase that Brené Brown used, and she might have got it from somewhere else, and I quoted, every opportunity I get, we are all just walking each other home. You know, and even
absolutely, time, step by step.
We're walking each other home. Nobody's pretending to have it all together or to have all the answers. We're just sharing a little bit of ourselves and our lives. I love that to do that on life's journey. So
and we're all facing so many of the same challenges. and the
So
same
true.
feelings. And yeah, we've got to navigate our way through it somehow.
And how crazy is it, Sue, that when you know that somebody's facing the same challenges as you, almost feel like, phew, you feel a
Not
little
so
better
bad.
and you can breathe. I'm not that crazy, actually. Because
Yeah,
you can
I know.
think that you're a little bit nuts, you know, but you realize
I
that you're all
know.
facing it. We're all in
We're
it.
all facing it, yeah.
Yeah, so, and that's really comforting when we can create these kind of moments to talk, just walk each other home without judgments, but in a nurturing, encouraging, lots of grace and compassion for one another.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
thanks, Barbie.
Sue, thank you. It was great having you. And I know that, you know, often in these kind of discussions, it could raise further questions. And maybe you want to process a little further some of these questions that have come out of your own marriage relationship. And you think, oh, what do I do with it? I don't want you to sit with it, you know, and think, well, you've got to endure it until you get out of the pandemic. Actually, you can make contact with our counseling department. We have a wonderful counseling department, people who can walk you home. We're walking each other home. Or in fact, if you want to make contact with Sue and her private practice, the details, our details, Sue details will be on the screen below. You can go to our website as well, and we would love to make contact with you. So, Sue, I was just wondering, we've got just maybe a few minutes, I think. Would you pray with us?
Yes,
would you just
I will
lift
do
a little
that.
prayer for us? And then I'll just quickly wrap it up with what's coming next week for us. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate
it.
Yes.
Okay. Father, I thank you that you're with us and you're closer than breathing. And as we all experience different things, I thank you that although you're a God who is so great and so powerful and so up there, I thank you that you come alongside us, you feel with us, and you understand exactly what we're going through. Thank you that you too were a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. You knew what sadness was and you knew what loss was. And so you understand some of our hardest moments. And today I just want to bring each marriage to you, Lord. And I thank you that you brought those people together for your purposes. And I pray that you would just help each couple to just be that little bit more loving and graceful during this time where there's so much pressure. Thank you that we can reach beyond ourselves to a God who gives strength to those who call on him. And so we ask for that and thank you that you are willing to give us strength and give us your peace in these times that are often so troubled. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you, Sue. I really do value that. So we're going to get to see you next week, same time. We're going to be talking about mental health in the pandemic. And we have with us Maria Smith, who is a psychologist. He also is a prof at UWC. And he's going to take some time, some of his very generous time, to come and talk to us, because we know that this is a challenging time in which we've had, and it's not just the pandemic, it's what's happening in our world right now with Black Lives Matter and all of these that is pressing in on our world. And actually, these are the things that we need to talk about. So I'll get to see you next week, same time. Have a beautiful week further. Peace and love to you.
In Jesus' name.